And we should be going live with the Lesson Learned podcast. We did it by the nick of time. I'm sorry you had to see that, but the trilogy thing that was from the countdown. I should create a dedicated banner for the podcast. You know, a year and some change after we started. Yeah. So how you doing?
I'm doing all right. It's been a long week, but
Yeah. So how was your New Year's?
pretty good.
Mine.
Surprisingly calm.
Yeah. I we didn't have as many fireworks as I expected, but aside from that, yeah, it was okay. I did get a cold though, so I started the new year with a cold. Then and I got over it, but still, it's like that's not a good way to start a year. Um,
Yeah.
and talking about starting a new year, apparently we're gonna start with the same thing we left last year, and that's
Yeah.
talking about not only industry news but Activision. Because why
Wow.
the
It's
heck
been a
not?
busy couple of weeks for Activision.
Ooh, I don't know. Now it seems to be a race to the bottom between Activision and Bethesda, with sometimes Ubisoft and
And
EA
EA.
popping. It's like, hey, are you still on? Can we still run this race? I'm like, no, dude, just stay the hell out, please. Could we not do this? Because this be bad. We're really bad. You know, it was my worst Bill Clinton impersonation for some reason. I have no idea why I did that. But yeah, here we are. And for those who are tuning in, just welcome, welcome, welcome. Um, we do have
Just
quite a bit of news to talk about, mostly the Activation, but we're going to talk about other things first because that's how we roll.
yeah, my mic sensors is gonna poop out, I guess.
Uh,
uh, there we go.
okay.
I like that angle.
And I've been doing some little bit of research, which means I basically open a couple of windows about the history of Activision just to cover my bases, so you guys don't get realize that from different sources, not just Wikipedia, just so you know. Um, but let's start with the runner-ups. EA. The news, according to Jason Schreider from Kotaku, is that EA canceled another Star Wars game, an
Or
open world Star Wars game that never got a name.
yeah, so or sort of like the same Star Wars. It's kind of.
Well, it was a game that Visceral was working on
And
conceptually, I suppose.
yeah.
But then Visceral got bought out by EA and swallowed up after Titanfall 2. And
Well,
so.
actually, you're confusing your studios. That was they've been bought out for a while.
Oh, yeah,
That
they've
was
been. Sorry. It's just so there's so many acquisitions by Electronic Arts, and by acquisition I mean like chomping. It's like a little kid chomping on fresh donuts, like like Cookie Monster kind of way, which is disgusting. Funny when
but
Cookie Monster does it, but no.
yeah, but yeah, you're right. Visceral Games was working on a single player Star Wars game, headed by like the same person who also spearheaded the Uncharted series, I believe. I can't
Yes.
recall her name.
What's the code name of the project was Ragtag, and the development lead was one of the was the narrative lead for the Uncharted series, but that went down the tubes, and then it got over by EA Vancouver, which
They essentially kind of repurpose a lot of those assets to try to see how to make it a multiplayer game, because the excuse that EA said at the time was that, oh, it's a single player game. Those aren't profitable. We don't want to make this game.
let us quote from EA Vancouver's own, as quoted by David Trier. It has become clear, to our bottom lines, that the delivered experience that players will want to come back to and enjoy for a long time to come, a maximum engagement for as long as possible. We can get much money of them out of microtransactions through loot crates, loot boxes. We need to pivot the design. We need to scrap everything and create another Star Wars, not quite MMO, but sort of kind of game. So yeah, And supposedly they had a development team from across EA Worldwide Studios would take over development game led by a team from EA Vancouver, been working on the project. And Vancouver sounds familiar. I know I'm thinking about Montreal, but
Well,
it's
I
so
believe
close to.
some of the, I want to say some of the people from Montreal, from BioWare Montreal, were absorbed into EA Vancouver, but it was mostly EA Motive.
Yeah, in 2018, announced that it had expanded its Motive studio, previously a single office in Montreal, by industry veteran Jane Raymond, to Vancouver location as well. And Motive is one of it was a studio that absorbed, again, sort of munched on what was once BioWare Montreal, so developers of a Mass Effect Andromeda. So yes, this is a convoluted. Uh,
Yeah, but like I find it interesting that like the reason why this game was canceled, because this is essentially we're gonna recycle, probably save some money, take what was being developed and repurpose, take some of that, repurpose it into a multiplayer game, only to cancel it because they don't think they would have had it done by 2020, which for some reason they seem to really want a Star Wars game out in 2020.
oh, I guess I do. We all know the reason for that one. The new consoles. They probably already have the dev kits, and they want to make sure that they have a launch title for it. Probably a launch title that can connect the old platforms to the new ones. Probably gonna do it for a dual release like they did with stuff like Dragon Age, right?
Yeah.
And
So,
Titanfall.
hmm so I'm wondering if what EA's planning to do is either one, they're going to make a really rushed out crap game that's gonna pretty much end up being the Star Wars Battlefront games, which is going to be, looks nice but lacking in content by the time. Because if they're scrapping this now and starting fresh, they have less than 2 years to get this done if they want to meet that 2020.
Well, there is another. Okay, this says that even Coinexing will be. They don't know what, but Respawn, the company that did
Yes.
get that was the one with
Which is,
Titanfall.
yep, which is my other point, which is I believe that they're going to put all their chips into Respawn's project. So this makes me wonder if they're going to either have EA Vancouver kind of start on a different
This
project, or
update is
maybe
sponsored by Mood.
help the support Respawn in some way in trying to develop this game. So,
Yeah.
I know. I honestly I'm not that big of a Star Wars fan. I'm just a very passive. Oh, it's a fun property, but I'm not a particular like hyped up a Star Wars fan. So to me, it's kind of like no love lost. It's oh well. It kind of sucks for I guess the creative visions of like the developers and the artists and stuff. But
I am
like
a Star Wars fan, and I've been playing Star Wars games for a very long time. Some of them are very good, some of them not so good, of course. And that's what happened to LucasArts. LucasArts, ironically, their pinnacle was when they were actually not making Star Wars games. And sorry, my chair is. I'm going lower and lower because my chair is rebelling. Apologies for that. Anyway, here we are. And so when LucasArts, basically George Lucas and his, he was a CEO, said, we want more Star Wars support for the new movies and all that. They started putting out more and more products about that, and quality went down. And then I think the lesson that Disney came from that was like, we're not gonna create an entire studio just to make games. We can just partner up with existing, other people. Sony for Spider-Man, which is also, well, with Sony as well, I suppose, and stuff like that. And we can partner with them, and we get the profits and the support for our products without having to risk all that money, in a new risky venture that we know little or nothing about. So that's, and they handed the ball to EA, and well, EA is now doing a LucasArts, and sort of their quality is going down, 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 and it's a shame because there's so much you can do in the Star Wars universe that doesn't include Jedi. Although the name of Respawn's game is called Star
Jedi.
Wars Jedi: The Fallen Order.
And so it's I saw somebody, I think it was Young, yeah, who shared a like an image that somebody made on Twitter, which is in the span of 4 years, this is all the titles that LucasArts made that was Star Wars related, and then like in the same in 4 years after EA got the exclusive license, they've only published two games.
Yeah. Moving away a little bit from that, we can go to Rockstar, who got sued. Rockstar got sued by the Pinkerton Agency, which is still around. For people who don't know what the Pinkerton's Agency is, it's a
I
detective.
don't.
Well, it's a little bit of Americana history, so to speak. And it's the Pinkertons were and still are a private detective company. Now they were famous and infamous during the 19th century for, among other things, serving as a sort of the first bodyguards to President Lincoln, which that didn't work out so well. They were also sort of a spy agency for Lincoln during the Civil War. But also they were known as sort of Union busters and the like. And in the game, of course, they're shown as the Pinkertons, right? The agent that, one of the things that hunts down the heroes or the protagonists who are outlaws. And apparently they didn't like that, ironically, how they were portrayed, and so, they're suing. I don't know how that's going to go, but it seems rather bizarre to me. A little, news there that was like,
I
what?
mean, it almost seems like if they are kind of like a part of Americana, that would be like having like the CIA almost like sue because they were portrayed in a video game, and like whenever they were founded by or something without them being consulted or something.
Some designers of video games and all that have gone, writers as well, gone out of their way not to call the CIA, and the NSA, or certain people in power for their names. They use euphemisms, but this thing seems just silly. It just seems like they believe that their modern day, reputation will be. That they'll be affected in some way or another, and I think that's hard to prove, to say the very least. Yeah, I don't think that's. I don't think it's gonna go well anywhere, but well, we'll see.
Yep.
We'll probably hear about it about a couple of months from now. It's like, yeah, that thing got either we'll get news that it continued, or that it simply was dismissed for some reason. In the same another vein of companies kind of screwing up, Valve's Artifact, their collectible card game, is dead. It's cratered. It has lost massive amounts of players. It started out with, I think, well over 1 million players, and now it's not doing very well at all. It's not officially dead, I believe. Let me just check for a moment. Artifact.
When did this game come out? Isn't this the game that came out that everyone's like, Valve's making a new game? Is it Half-Life 3? Oh, it's a trader card game.
Let me look at some of the. Okay, according to VG247, Final Fantasy has lost almost 80% of its player base since launch. 80%. It started, highest concurrent users was 60,740 players, which is pretty good. At the time of writing, this is from the website, it has around 7,000 players. When you have CCG, I think the timing was all off because Magic the Gathering has come back in a big way. It's been around for a while online, but it's really come back in a big way. And you have Hearthstone, and you have so many other card games. It felt like, and Valve, well, not Valve. I mean, there are other games out there, and so again, it's one of those. Let's jump into the bandwagon and hope we can catch, catch lightning in a bottle. And it feels that it didn't. Also, I mean, in an era when you have a backlash against loot boxes and loot crates, the collectible card aspect of it is kind of like a loot box, right? You open a pack and you get something random, and people are not, they're not really happy with that anymore. And so I think, people might go like, yeah, we don't. It's another game that I'm not gonna play, so screw it. Why should I bother, right? No way to justify it, yeah.
It's just like another case of how the mighty have fallen.
I mean, Valve is still Valve and still making hand over fist. Although, again, they are. And we talked about this last year. They're facing increased competition from Epic, and I believe there's a piece of news about that.
The Division 2, I think.
Yes, the Division 2. I think. Let me just check. Will probably be coming first to the Epic Game Store, although Ubisoft has its own storefronts and client. It's weird how they. Yes, yeah. Here it is. That was 8 days ago. Division 2 will release for PC through the Epic Game Store, not Steam, the Epic Game Store. And I haven't downloaded. I mean, I don't care about the Division myself. I'm not gonna play it. But the fact that such a big game from such a big company is, giving exclusivity to Epic, I don't know. That's a big blow for Valve.
Well, and especially since the Ubisoft has their own launcher too, the Uplay.
Yeah, which universally hated, but for good reason. So,
but it's willing to put its game out onto one other platform, but not another. Not like the one that's still arguably the most used and popular.
So yeah, I mean, maybe some kind of back deal was caught. I mean, remember, Epic is they also are creators of one of the most popular game engines, which is Unreal Engine, right? And a big factor in making video games is the game engine they use. So maybe some kind of back deal. Maybe Epic is leveraging its engine. So, wait, you could be first in. And remember, now we have up and coming. 2020 is around the corner. We talk about new consoles, and usually when you release new consoles, you also have new engines to go to that new hardware. This is just speculation, of course, but I think maybe Epic. I mean, that's what Epic really has. It has a huge player base in the form of Fortnite, of course. So you want to jump into that bandwagon, at least tangentially be in the quote unquote ecosystem, is one thing. And second, maybe they're leveraging their assets in the form of, hey, you want a discount, or you want it for free and some technical assistance, and we can jump in and we can make beautiful games together, right? In more than just, here's our engine, give us $100,000 or $1 million or whatever, and we'll go from there, or $5 million, whatever it is. What is it? The full asking price for the Unreal Engine? Although Unreal Engine is supposed to be free for small developers under some kind of deal. Yeah, it's. I think Epic is trying to do the Unity thing and try to use that their most powerful asset, which is the games that you make with this are supposed to be better, kind of situation, and maybe that's what's happening. And maybe, or again, might be that companies like Ubisoft are unhappy with the deals that they're doing with Steam, right? Maybe it's a way of them leveraging Epic Store against Steam and saying, hey, we now have more choices than you and GOG. And GOG, well, we're kind of not. Nobody's really jumping to the GOG wagon. It's sort of a second tier, distributor for AAA games at best. But now we have somebody who is as big as or bigger than you are. At least financially speaking, they have deep pockets. So what kind of deal can you cut me into? How are you gonna improve my distribution? How are you going to? Because I think eventually might just jump in and involve. I mean, it's gonna be a this seems like one game situation, but it could be we can see more and more games in this process in the future.
Yeah. Hmm. I just wonder what that's going to mean for like if indie games are going to get more exposure. But of course, that's only if they use Unreal Engine.
And I think that one of the reasons, one of the deals they have is also if you sell them through Epic Games Store, it is cheaper as well
Hmm.
to use their engine. So in essence, Epic is using the fact that they have the Unreal Engine as a sort of a co-developer deals kind of thing. They're doing a sort of mix and match of producing and co-developing and having a store. Um, I don't know how that's going to shape out, but if they could either hit the right mix, so that they could have these packages they could deliver to individuals and other companies, they could certainly be in a better position than Valve. Valve has sort of given up on development. Their publisher they publish some titles, but really they're just an online store. And also, it might be that years and years of basically saying, we don't have to, keep quality controls in our store because it's just a storefront. It's coming back to hurt them. You know.
Yep.
Talking about Ubisoft, though, and this was gonna get interesting. Assassin's Creed Odyssey DLC forces players into a heterosexual romance, whether it is for the babies only or for long-lasting relationship.
Yeah. So this is something I kind of thought was that kind of went through my mind when I first heard that Assassin's Creed was going to have like, oh, you can be pansexual or you know be in a gay relationship, whatever your flavor of gender is. But it's like, so that the series is based on like bloodlines, and that I'm not entirely sure if it's already dropped the pretext of like somebody reliving like their ancestors' past memories through their DNA, which I've always thought was kind of stupid in terms of like pseudoscience kind of crap. But it's like, but that if they have the choice to have like gay relationships, they're gonna have to at some point still make a baby somehow. It's so like they kind of knew they would have to cross that bridge eventually, and I guess they didn't do a very good job at it.
It's, or I mean, or maybe just ditch the whole bloodline things to begin with, right? I mean, you have basically these pieces of Eden and stuff like that are magical. They're magic. They're pseudo technology. They're magic. So you could literally, I don't know, do a sort of not a Moses, but a Jesus, and go like, yeah, we created a baby. You want to
Yeah.
be just point at a woman and go like, you want to be the baby mama? Okay, here I have this stick and woo, baby mama, you have the power of the ancients now. Hooray! And they come after you or protect
I
you.
mean, I guess it'd be one thing. It's like if it's, oh, we needed to make like a surrogate child or something. Because I know
Yeah.
there's these past cultures, you don't have to really agree with them. Like you see them in like the classic like Hebrew and Christian Bible, where if your brother has like a wife and he dies before they can conceive, then it's your responsibility to make sure that she has a baby to kind of keep your. I mean, you don't have to agree with that, but I mean that I guess that would have been one way. It would be kind of crap, but it's like you don't really have to have like a relationship with your baby's mama, your baby's daddy.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. It's and then I was reading because of course I was on Facebook a PC gamer comment section, like I don't know what people are complaining about, blah blah blah. Well, as a cisgendered heterosexual man, I would tell you why people are complaining about it, because of course I have the authority to do that, and it's my podcast. The same reason why I didn't like Far Cry 5. It's like, oh, you're supposed to have all these choices, and then we took this choice away. either don't give me the choice because your narrative says that this is not a thing that your game's gonna have, which is fine. I mean, I'm not a big thing about. I'm not a big on romances. Everybody knows it, but if it's there, they just carry on full with it, right? It's like, oh yeah,
Hmm.
you have this choice, but we just decided to change it because reasons. And it's a DLC. You don't have to buy the DLC, but of course, people who are into the game want to see what happens with the characters in the DLC. So, blah blah blah
And of
blah.
course, it's canonical and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
It's essentially Mass Effect 3 all over again. It's like, hey, your choices matter, and we sell you. It's in the marketing. It's like your choices are going to matter, and it's going to affect the game. And it's like, no, it doesn't.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah, we do whatever. Basically, Ubisoft at the end of the day is like we do whatever the fuck we want. What do you know? And also, the big selling point of the game was that you could play this character in this way and do that. Most people just didn't care about that. That's fine. But those people who did and bought the game were expecting it. Again, what I said about Mass Effect 3, you got to deliver on your promises. If you don't, you're failing to put a quality product out there. It's as simple as that. So, from a consumer point of view, at least, it's like stick to your promises, dudes. Just do it. Just do the thing. Another piece of news: Rocket League adds crossplay to PS4. In other
About
words,
time.
Rocket League just flipped the switch and ta-da, PS4 crossplay. That's it.
Yeah, apparently, like after pulling teeth with Sony,
Sorry.
and even then, again, I think I brought this up before. Does anyone care anymore? Like, we kind of moved past this, I guess, this
Yeah.
controversy. It's just like, does anyone care? It's like, oh yeah, crossplay, that's a thing. And
Well, I think it's again we're moving into 2020 or 2021, and maybe PS4's subtly sort of okay giving in on this, so hedging their bets the way Microsoft is doing. Like this is a way to keep people playing in our platform, right? And so if we offer it, then it's like, well, we have cross-platform play in your favorite games like Rocket League, so you can still play. Buy a new console because it has the same things that the old console had. You know, it's one of those things that you sort of tick the check boxes in the commercial. Like what all the things that this thing offers this and this and this and this and these are the games that have this and this and this, right? If somebody who's looking in detail go like, oh, that's interesting, you only notice it when it's not there. Like, oh,
mhm.
wait a minute, but Xbox. Oh, okay. Like, people don't care about seatbelts until you tell, oh, this car doesn't have seatbelts. Like, what? but I don't want to die in my own car. Well, just gotta take. You're a good driver, right? Go ahead, just take a chance. So I think that's why it's there. It's just a box to be ticked. Yeah, talk about. Let's go to Bethesda because we can't talk about crappy companies without talking about Bethesda. Bethesda, and I was talking about this to not Hector Troy. Let me just somebody I was talking to last night while we're playing Cyberpunk 2020, and Hurricane Hugo. He runs our Cyberpunk 2020 on games on Wednesday nights on Rockter's channel, and he basically said that, and he's worked with other companies before, so he knows a little bit about game development. Essentially, what happened is that Bethesda, the game that they have live, they don't have a different build between, they have a sort of a dummy build that you do in multiplayer games, and then you have your live build. Well, they don't have a dummy build. Everything is in the live build. So what they do is it's just release updates. They just re-upload and change and do the update. And part of that was including a devs room, or sometimes called a void room or an empty room or a toy room or whatever. There's basically an area reserved in the dummy build for you to put a bunch of stuff like, oh, I want to have access to all the weapons and stuff like that, where you put you put them there so that they're in the world, but they're not part of the build, so that if you summon them through a console commands, like, oh yeah, there's this plasma rifle, it's there. You have to have the asset in game, and the easiest way to do is make this room with all the assets and all the bonuses, and that includes, by the way, all the things from loot crates. The launch boxes are there.
Mm-hmm.
But because they didn't do a separate build, the only thing they did was disable the console commands in a game engine that everybody has modded for the last 10 plus years. Well, some people were able to restore the console commands and go to the void room, the dev room, and found all the toys. So literally, it's like breaking into the virtual, vault of Fallout 76 and finding all the goodies here. It's like, oh, here
Oh
are
yeah,
all the
especially all the unreleased stuff too.
yeah, and all the things that other people would be paying money for
Mm.
to unless they want to grind, in which case they have to grind and hope that they get the thing. So here's like literally grab that. Oh, this one has. Oh, this one. Okay, I just keep dragging them until I get what I want. So it's like that. And goddamn it, my chair. Ugh. Is it gonna be a thing throughout the podcast, folks? I'm sorry. It's just this broken old piece of crap I'm sitting on. I'm gonna have to change it. So yeah, it's a thing, and it's like, and it goes to quality, which is a problem 76 has had, and Bethesda's had for a long time. But also it goes to, it gets you an inside look on how games are developed and the things that you shouldn't do. Like I said, it should be a simple matter of having at least two builds. Usually have more than one, depending on what you're talking about. And one of them is your dummy build, which is inside your servers for stress testing and design and changes and all that. And essentially, you take those parts and you pass them to us, another part of your server, right? And then from that part of the server, which are not interconnected, that's the one that then gets uploaded to the live game, which is in the third part of the server. So it's actually multi-step. It is 2 to 3 steps removed, depending how complex you want to go. The fact that they're just going like, yeah, whatever, you're just gonna, yeah, press the button, download it, cool, we're good to go, and there's no filter between them, shows how much cost cutting they wanted to do, and how thought they could get away with this stuff, and it's just one more level of embarrassment for Bethesda. It's like,
I know, and it's led to people buying stuff for real money for in-game objects. They're trying to ban people because I guess it corrupts your character. There's ways it can sort of tell, but essentially it's just leading to people making dummy accounts, running it, accessing the room, grabbing as many goodies as they can, leaving, trading it to like their main account before that account gets banned.
mm-hmm.
So
and once, or giving it to other people if you're able to share them.
Yeah.
I think you can share items, so you can have somebody raid the vault and just literally share them with everybody they find in the world, and so that or set up a quote unquote free store setup, like, hey, come over, I'm over here, I have free stuff, free goodies, and well, there goes your microtransactions. Whoops.
yeah, although it's mostly being taken advantage by people to kind of make their own microtransactions or
Yeah. Uh, so that's, unless I think you mentioned something in our Discord, a piece of news that you brought in.
the Activision, the Final Fantasy HD remake thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, so I found this interesting. So apparently, as we all know, that fans have been wanting a HD re-release of Final Fantasy VII. But Square Enix has trouble developing or delivering on that, even though they've been promising for years, just opting to re-release Final Fantasy VII for the PlayStation 4, I think a year or two ago. The the actual remake of Final Fantasy VII's been in development hell for the past couple of years now. But so apparently fans have been trying to make an HD remake using the Steam release of Final Fantasy VII. They've been able to update the character models and make them look really nice. But the biggest hurdle to trying to actually make an HD remake is the pre-render backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that before the Steam release, I guess Square Enix or Square at the time didn't keep a lot of the pre-render assets that were used to render the backgrounds, and apparently they just kind of kept the low resolution, highly compressed ones for the disc-based PlayStation 1. So if somebody really wants to make it truly HD, they would have to painstakingly go through every single asset, every single background, and try to upscale it somehow,
Mm-hmm.
which or re-render it, which is way too much work for someone who's just doing this as a hobby.
Mm-hmm.
However, there is a new algorithm program that's online that uses, I guess, a sophisticated AI of some sort that you can plug in, put in an image, tell it how big you want to upscale it, and it upscales it nicely. The program's called an AI gigapixel,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a video attached to the file or to the link or the article, and it does demonstrate like you can take a low res image and it almost, not only does it make it larger and make it clear, or at least kind of keep it looking nice and not like pixely. If you've ever tried to take a small image and blow it up, it almost somehow manages to add more detail than the original picture. It
Nice.
it is it is like really astounding, just how like how how sophisticated this AI is, just to do something simple as just making an image a lot bigger.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm kind of wondering if it'd be very embarrassing if like fans actually make like an HD mod to the Steam release and make a better like HD Final Fantasy VII before Square Enix can get their own out.
Yeah. Nothing would surprise me. They wouldn't surprise me at all. But talking about embarrassments, we're finally gonna go because we're about past half the hour. We're gonna go talk about the Activision. So we're gonna give you a couple of pieces of news first. We're gonna talk about them, and then we're gonna sort of go into the meat of the discussion. Let's start with a I don't know. Let's start with the fact that Activision paid $50 million bonus to its CFO while Blizzard lays off developers. Activision. Let's look at the little piece of news because I have a video link to this, but I don't wanna. I don't wanna just. Let's see. Yeah, PC Gamer. Let's talk about PC Gamer. Reputable. Uh, Activision Blizzard new CFO is getting an award worth of $50 million for taking the job. We talked about before last year how the different people in Activision have been leaving, right? And this is a former CFO
Mm-hmm.
that now, I mean, for example, CFO Spencer Newman was fired after negotiating with Netflix as a new employer. That's probably was a breaching contract. Uh, and also, Blizzard, the other part of the company, lost its CFO last week.
Yeah, after she was appointed earlier last year.
And then on top of that, Blizzard is well not firing. It's encouraging people to leave by giving something to talk about. There's a package that you can take, essentially easing people out, paying them to leave. And all this comes amidst complaints about Destiny and other things that Activision Call of Duty not doing as well as it thought, Destiny not doing as well as it did. But wait, there's more. Because, and this is from Variety, investors launch Activision Blizzard investigation over possible fraud following Bungie split. So we're getting closer to the meat of what we're talking about here. And this is from Variety. Call of Duty publisher Activision Blizzard under investigation for fraud following claims brought forth by company investors. Law firm the Pomerantz firm announced Monday. Investigation concerned whether Activision and certain of its officers and directors engaged in securities fraud or other unlawful business practices. This comes in the wake of Activision's recent separation from Destiny developer Bungie. On January 11, 2019, this is a quote from the missive, disclosed that it would be separated from its design developer Binary Bungie, etc., etc. And this is not an official government investigation. This is the investors. And they're investigating in order to see whether or not they have grounds to sue.
Hmm.
And time again, we talk about one of the things about the modern gaming industry, aside from my chair failing me again, is the fact that we have investors to please, right? So if the investors, some investors, I mean, depending who you are, there has to be a group of investors that have enough capital among them, and probably a good percentage of the company, maybe one, two, three, whole numbers of percentage together, to actually to hire a powerful law firm to do the investigation, right? And so, yeah, that it by itself, it's something that happens all the time. But considering the rest of that news, which is the real part, the meat of it, is the separation of Bungie from Activision. And
In
while we're
terms of like their Destiny franchise,
that
it's not like they were owned or anything.
no, to put that in perspective, Bungie used to work with Microsoft back in the day. They had made their own games like Marathon. Then they worked with Microsoft to develop a little known game as Halo. Halo came out, became a big system seller for the Xbox 360, and it's still owned by Microsoft, which is something that Bungie regretted because they didn't want to do Halo forever and ever. They had a new idea, a new IP called Destiny, but they partnered up with Activision, and apparently, and this is the interesting part, which is very rare, but they managed to pull it off. They must have had one or more clauses in their contract that allow them to separate at will from Activision at any time, right? Essentially end their partnership unilaterally. Of course, there's always some negotiations, but really, you just don't leave unless you really want to, and keep. And this is very important. Keep the Destiny IP. Now, one of the things that have hurt Destiny, not Destiny, but Destiny, but we'll talk about that in a second. Activision in the last year, and they lost, market share and all that, and their stock prices have gone down due to multiple things, multiple announcements. One of them was that Destiny wasn't making as much money as they wanted to. They were expecting. And in fact, one of the things that was said by, I think, the CEO at the time of Activision was that they were essentially going to double down into the microtransaction business because it's like, well, we're going to essentially exploit our already existing base more. We're going to try to get as much money, re-engage them, as they like to say. That word. I'm beginning to hate that word. And so at some point, probably Bungie said, oh, wait a minute. If this is happening, then, we're going to take the fall for this. And basically, I mean, Destiny and Destiny 2 has been fraught with problems, major, minor problems, for the last 8 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is also still the biggest single most expensive franchise in video game history. At an estimated, at the time, and that was 8 years ago, $500 million, or $500 million, as I always like to emphasize, project. And that money had to, most of it, come from Activision. That's why you have them for publisher, because they pay to make, depending on the deal, sometimes you just pay to advertise and sell it. That's strictly what publishing is. You advertise and you sell. But really, publishing is more of being an investor, right? You invest in the game, or in many cases, you like EA, for example, and Activision's done, you outright buy the company, the studio, own the IP, but you have the studio making the game under your umbrella of a large umbrella of Activision Blizzard or Electronic Arts or Ubisoft or whatever, right? That's how multiple levels of this. And that's, but again, Bungie retained enough independence that they could pull out. And probably somebody at Bungie was saying, hey, listen, if that's how they're thinking about our product, eventually they could just sort of deep six us, stab us in the back and blame us for everything else. And then we end up with a dead franchise and no other option, because this has been the big game that I've been working on for, the last 8-10 years, right? It could be one. We don't know exactly how, and the situation soured enough that Bungie decided to go out their own way. And the real head scratcher is, why didn't Activision really fight? Or maybe they were fighting to keep Destiny around, and they may be fighting it for years. We'll probably won't know until we get the usual
No.
company insiders and ex so and so from Activision and Bungie start talking behind the scenes, blah blah blah, etc. etc. etc.
But I think the clues can be kind of looked at. We can find some clues as to why maybe, and when we look at Blizzard, because we have been noticing that Activision has been cracking down on Blizzard's finances.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe to them, cutting loose or Bungie is just a way of cutting costs, because you know what, we've invested money. They've either into like the Destiny franchise, they've either recouped their losses already.
Yeah.
They've already recouped what they invested, or recouped more than that, or maybe not even recoup enough of it to
Mm-hmm.
justify just, you know what, cutting them loose. They're not worth investing anymore into Destiny. We're not going to see any money. We don't think this is worth a franchise worth investing to, so we're just going to cut our losses and cut them loose, not have to deal with them anymore.
And the whole situation mirrors, ironically enough, Activision's own history. So I'm going to read a little bit to you again from another article from the history of Activision. This is from Gamma Sutra, which is one of the most reliable sources you can find. And it talks about, I'm going to put the link in the description below so you can read it if you want to read it yourself. This is from Gamma Sutra's article, The History of Activision. But one of the things, first of all, Activision was born out of what soon would become the embers of Atari's game division and the 1982 video game crash. And one could argue that, like Bungie going its own way, it might be a signifier of things to come, and none of them positive. I'm not saying that we're going to have an industry-wide crash, but you see certain things. For example, one of the complaints, one of the things was that Atari was bought or sold to Warner Communications. Eventually, they will sell them out. Bob Crane, who was eventually one of the developers and founders of Atari, David Crane, sorry, who joined Atari in 1977. Bushnell, let me see, I read it because who was the actual owner and sold it to Warner. In spite of Warner's management, Atari was doing very well financially. Middle management made promise of profit sharing other businesses. Okay, fine. Bush clashed with Warner's board of directors in 1978. He was forced out of the company that he founded. To replace Bushnell, Warner installed former Burlington executive Ray Kassar as the company's new CEO. So yeah, installing developer or people who are not familiar with video game developers as executives in video game companies is as old as time itself, at least. And in fact, there was no profit sharing. And unfortunately, when it came to distribute these windfalls, senior management did not ever making such promises. Creative people, Crane, remember, creative people don't like to be lied to, and there was a revolt with many people leaving and others threatening to go. Job satisfaction in the engineering department was all-time low. At the same time, a memo circulated from the marketing department showing the prior year's cartridge sales broken down by game as a percentage of sales. The intent of the memo was to alert the game development staff that what types of games were selling well. Again, looking for patterns, which is, it makes sense, but, again, this memo backfired as it demonstrated the value of the game designers individually. Remember, back in the day, it was like 2 to 4K per cartridge. That's kilobytes, ladies and gentlemen. Not megabytes, not gigabytes, kilobytes. So cartridge could hold as much as 6 kilobytes, 8 if you're pressing your luck. So games were tiny and were made by individual people. Video game design in those days was one-on-one process, with one person doing the creative design, the storyboards, the graphics, the music, the sound effects, and every line of programming, and final play testing. So when I saw a memo that the games were I was 100% responsible for generating over 20 million revenues, I was one of the people wondering why I was working in complete anonymity for a $20,000 salary. which today's standard was like 60, 50, 60, 40 to $50,000,
I guess.
but
Let's
still was
see.
very little. Um,
Yeah.
even by 1970s 1980s standards. I mean, they were poor, but still, this is after double-digit inflation in 1970s, so it wasn't that great. Um, and yes, doing it for the love of the game. And he left Atari with three other designers, and this led to two lawsuits. One of those lawsuits was remaining designers on Atari wanted to, they started putting Easter eggs in their games and eventually got the rights to be, named as designers, which meant, of course, that they could ask for more money. And the second, which Atari lost that suit, and the second suit was against Activision when they started making games like Pitfall for the Atari VCS, the video computer system, not console. And they lost this suit of saying that they had exclusive control over the games. Anybody could make games for Atari, which led to a lot of crappy games being put out, and a lot of the problems that eventually led to the release of Pac-Man and E.T. and the 1982 crash. But the interesting thing is that Activision came out of a need to get more control to the designers, to the
Hmm.
developers. And now we're talking about, under this Bungie split, how Bungie is getting out from under Activision. And one of the things about it is, again, going back to that $500 million investment, I'm sure they probably made a couple of billions out of that. But Activision has become sort of the big game company in this, literally, on the sense that they have the one or two or three big games. They don't. I mean, what's name rattle off 10 games that Activision has done outside of Destiny and Call of Duty? Anybody? Chat?
Hmm. I mean, they they did just launch like the remakes of like Crash and Spyro, and that's about it. That's
Yeah, but
all I
that's
can
that's
really.
in their library, right? That's
Yeah.
like Atari has a library, like Nintendo has a library. I'm talking about current games or future games they're gonna be announcing, for example, in E3 this year, 2019, or announce E3 2018. Not a lot. Why? Because
No.
Activision is literally the big game company. Like, Call of Duty, one of the biggest games out there. Destiny, one of the biggest games out there, right? They don't have a huge stable of games because they're the company has the one few games that make them a lot of money. In fact, most of the games that get developed on the Blizzard side of things. And now they're saying, Blizzard, cut down your cost and try to make your games mobile. I put a theory before, and it seems to be happening, although the evidence is circumstantial still, at least, that what's really happening is that Activision is seeing a slowdown on their sales. Investors are getting antsy. They're also, there's the fact that we had to admit we're entering into a bad economic downturn. Um, so it affects all the tech industry and everyone else. Um, and one of the things that's happening is that their stocks is going down. When the stock goes down, means that the value of your company is going down. You're worth less than you're worth before. You're losing money. Literally, the worth of your company is less, so you're less valuable. Therefore, you have less money to play with, all around. That depletes your coffers. That affects how you do business. And so they're looking toward Blizzard to make up the difference. They're cutting supposedly the fat so that they can get more profit out of Blizzard. But I also thinking that they may be also deeping because they put a CFO of their own people, chief financial officer. They're the ones who installed them to get directly control Blizzard's financials. And that puts them in a position where they can essentially go to Blizzard's extremely deep pockets. I mean, this is Blizzard of World of Warcraft, who has basically making billions of dollars for well over 10 years, and Overwatch, and Diablo, and all these things to keep themselves afloat. Which is how, for example, EA survived the last economic downturn, because they had deep pockets, they had a lot of money to burn. It's how Nintendo survived the Wii U, not making as much sales, right?
Well, and of course, I think it should be noted that the other way that Nintendo actually helped out the companies that their top executives took pay cuts.
Yes,
They
they
didn't
did.
give themselves bonuses. They gave themselves pay cuts in order to make sure that the company stays afloat and they don't have to fire anybody.
And Activision's way of doing things is the reverse. They're giving millions of dollars benefits. We were talking about the $50 million bonus to the new CFO, which was an older CFO that go back to become a
Yeah,
CFO.
and I want to say that he was making more money than like the CEO the CFO that he was replacing to begin with, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and that's a and now you have the investigation going as well, whether there's been fraud and insider trading. Um, and if you can prove insider trading, not only does Activision will have to pay a lot of money to their investors, so the ones they're suing, but every one of the investors is going to run for the hills, because that will really hurt more than any boycott, many other complaints. That is really going to hurt the bottom line, because investors say, no, we can't put our money in this company when the people in that company are betting against our interest as investors. Investors are happy when they get catered to, and not very happy when you're betting against their own interests, right? And leaving them
Yeah.
off to dry, right? And of course, again, I said this, success breeds success, failure breeds failure. So if people feel that you are failing and that you have a bad aura or bad smell around you, they stick away. It's like, no, the Activision isn't a good company to invest in. Go somewhere else. So it becomes sort of a death spiral, financial death spiral. And I think, and that also might go to insider trading in the sense that they know it's happening, and they're moving the chairs around to make sure that they can either cushion the blow or survive what what is to come, right? That 2019 or 2020 might not, especially now that again we talk about 2020 and ramping up to be the new console generation, which again, look at what EA was saying. Look at how Activision operates. If nothing else, you want to keep something like Destiny around. I mean, look at Activision. Well, there's other reasons why EA keep the SWTOR around, and that's because of the Star Wars franchise, of course. And having a game that is, probably one of the contracts with Disney is you almost always have to publish something Star Wars related every year. If that comes in the way of updates and expansions to SWTOR, for example, well, you fulfill your contract obligation. So, you don't lose the franchise. That's probably one of the reasons why they're keeping SWTOR. Among others, they're probably making the money as well, but not hand over fist as they thought they would. And Activision's like, well, not having a Destiny or equivalent product, again, to keep the player base from one generation of consoles to the next. Because again, you got to be able to bargain. Everything is complicated. You have to bargain with the console developers and say, okay, console, like, yeah, what do you got for me, right? Well, I got Destiny, which for PlayStation 4, for example, has been one of the biggest games ever.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, sure, we can keep doing business. Oh, what do you got? You got Call of Duty? Yeah, okay, that's cool. What else? I don't know. We got this bunch of games that are mobile ports. We can port them over. It's like Sony's like, yeah, I don't know. We're doing very well with our own first party stuff. Maybe Nintendo wants to have it. Hey, Nintendo, you want this? And then like, now we want it. Microsoft, you want it? Sure. Why not? It's on PC, right? Yeah. And yeah, I mean, you look at this and
It it's almost like history's repeating themselves. Like Activision's coming full circle. Like they they started trying to get away from the man, and now they've become the man.
yeah, I mean, they started in 1985. One of the first companies they got was Infocom, and that company made 10 games like Sork Zero, BattleTech. I mean, Infocom was also a publisher, so it was a publisher on their publisher thing. And and it's not the first time that Activision has been in this situation. They survived the crash of 1983-84, right? According to the history here. Uh,
Hmm.
but and they also had um, other problems. But yeah, I mean, I'm thinking that perhaps again, I don't expect Activision to crash and burn, but it's something's gonna gotta give. And either it's
Yeah,
gonna be Blizzard, it's gonna be hollowed out, or they're gonna pull out somehow, somewhere.
yeah, that's it. I was gonna say the death nail in the coffin for Activision would be if Blizzard is somehow able to separate themselves from Activision. I don't think that's likely, just the way that I think Activision's got their tentacles just tied around them too much. But I could be wrong.
I don't think they have the same clauses. Again, another piece of news is history is that Activision Blizzard at one time. Here's a couple of things. First of all, Bungie not only have to have the clause, they're also saying that they're going to self-publish Destiny, which means that they have enough money out of Destiny. Their pockets are deep enough. Destiny is, at least for them,
Well,
profitable enough for them to make this move, because otherwise they would have said, okay, fine, we go our own way, you keep Destiny because running Destiny is too expensive. We'll take our money and do something else, right?
actually, sort of. I kind of don't believe that, and that's because if you recall last year, they did some sort of deal with NetEase, so a Chinese company, they got an investment for some supposedly like another game or an announcement. But I mean, that's kind of like, so you don't have the money to do like your own, invest in your own game, I guess, without outside companies. So I'm a little like, maybe not. So to me, like, from Bungie, I'm wondering if they're not like making a deal with one other devil to get away from like the deal with the devil they already made. It
They could have been leveraged this new investment that buffed them up and like, okay, we don't need Activision anymore because we have this other source of investment coming in, right?
Yeah, but now they're owned by NetEase, kind of.
Well,
Just kind of
depends how
not
much
not so much
percentage.
owned, but they might have like a little leash on them now.
Yeah, well, he golden rule. Who has the goal makes the rules, and that's always been how Activision has worked in the last 10, 15 years or so. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be interesting to see how things go for Bungie in term going on their own, and or seeing if they do do get eaten up by a Chinese company, and how, I guess, how Activision is going to fare. Maybe they'll actually come up with like maybe they'll come up with some actually good games and new franchises
Yeah,
that they
we'll
won't
see.
milk to death, but I doubt that.
Yeah, I think, and there's another thing when people want to say, well, Activision is very big, too big to fail, etc. Man, I saw your link. I was reading it. It's like, oh, this has happened before, right? There's a difference. Uh, Aside from 1983, 84, we never seen really a bubble like we've seen today. Like literally in the last 10 years or so, the profits have just shot to the roof, especially when you talk about microtransactions, particularly when you talk about loot boxes. So the no growing numbers of people playing games, again, Destiny had a record of 25 million users at its peak. The last game that did that and it came anywhere close to that online game was World of Warcraft with 13 million. So it's almost double or nearly triple the numbers in sales and all that. And online users and whatnot. We've seen a huge buildup, but again, we saw a bubble with MMOs and then it popped and a few have survived, but many of them have gone out of business. We have seen another bubble that has now extended across the industry because it's really about engagement and microtransactions and all these things. And if Activision is the sign that that bubble is popping, and like I said, it's a death spiral of people losing confidence in Activision, because before, one of the things that Activision wasn't a public traded company necessarily back in the day. Now it is, right? That's where a lot of the money comes from as well, the investors, and that's who they want to please. You could see a death spiral, right? So this could be, from worst to best scenarios, I think, would go something like this. Activision essentially pops a bubble. Bubble pops. Everybody looks at Activision like, oh, you were the ones who created it or pushed it hard and you popped it. And that leads to everybody suffering and companies closing, including Activision and Blizzard and everybody else. So some big names getting wiped out. That's the worst case scenario. Is another crash scenario. The one I'm settling close to is Activision survives, but it does so by hollowing out Blizzard and leaving it just as a husk, as a name. Does Activision and Blizzard, a fully owned subsidiary of Activision, right?
Yep.
And the third scenario here is that somehow Blizzard basically breaks up or gets under Activision, just like Bungie managed to do in their own way, leaving Activision alone, and then you have, I would say, 50-50 chance of Activision surviving as is, basically imploding, having more of an Atari situation where the name is so recognizable, which it's old, born in 1981, 82, right? It's one of the oldest games in the industry, at least American side of things, that it somehow survives as an entity, but it's not the same. Just like Atari has survived as a name over this many decades, but it's clearly not the original company by a long shot.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of the best worst scenario, I suppose. Which just one company takes it in the chin and everybody else sort of bug out and survives. But that's it.
Well, let's just hope they don't have like some weird like tiff amongst like the CEO and like a former lawyer that used to work that used to be friends, and they seem to have a falling out like Randy Pitchford over at Gearbox.
Yeah. Note of that. I thought about that while we were talking about this. Like, the reason I didn't cover that and bring that news is that there's a particular dark side to that news, which is right now it's innuendo and hearsay.
It's accusations, but yeah, I mean that's.
And
that's
I'm not gonna go in there as of yet.
Yeah, but we're
gonna keep our. Yeah, it's a topic for a future podcast, definitely.
But that'd be the topper for Activision to have like a scandal just like that.
Oof, let's hope not. If you want to know more about that, just Google it yourself. But be prepared for some rather dark claims out there, made by people in suits and countersuits. So.
Yeah, they're having a tiff too, so it's also kind of hard to see what's real and what's not, what's made up.
Then again, Randy Pitchford doesn't have the best reputation as a straight shooter. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And that's all I'm gonna say because I don't want to have to call my lawyer yet. So let's leave it at that. Yes, even I suffer from fear of lawyers, or other people's lawyers, actually. Anyway, well, that's all we have for our discussion on Activision in this program. It's Happy New Year to those who are still surviving or recuperating from the last year. We hope that it will go well for all of us, and you included. And, Chapelmon, where can we find you on the interwebs?
You can find me at Chapelmon pretty much everywhere. I am Chapelmon_Aragon on Twitch and Twitter, and I primarily hang out on YouTube as Chapelmon.
And you can find me still playing the Bard's Tale trilogy, the first part of the trilogy. Probably going to finish it this week or next week. I'm getting close to it. Probably Monday, Tuesday we finish. And then we'll either continue with that or jump into some free the Devolver digital games that I got for free in the Christmas break. Counting down to the release of Ace Combat 7 for the PC on January 31st. So thank you all for coming. If you want to support this channel, there are many ways to do so. You can join the chat. You can join the Discord, which I will put the link to below for all kinds of discussion, industry, and all kinds of other game-related discussions. And you can sub, which are always welcome, as well as you can follow and cheer. So thank you all for coming, and thank you for all the people who have been sharing and subbing and following and supporting this program. You guys are amazing. And also a shout out to Anna the Unknown, who keeps making wonderful art for the channel. You can check her out on her Twitch channel. And that's all I got to say about that. So thank you for coming, and of course we'll see you when we see you. Bye-bye.
Bye.